to turn that over to him. So whenever you're
All
ready,
right.
Ben.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. And welcome everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to this, and particularly with, a nice sized group like we have. Feel free to put any questions into the chat, and I don't mind answering those as we go through the presentation. And there'll also be plenty of time at the end to ask other questions. So without further ado, I think I'll try to share my screen here. Let's see. All right. Can you see that?
Good.
Thumbs up.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right. Here we go. So just a little bit of background. I'm in Massachusetts and started working with beavers over 25 years ago. And so this talk is based on the experience I've had installing over 2,000 of these devices, and also based on the experiences of people I've helped mentor in our Beaver Corps program with the Beaver Institute. So hopefully you'll find it interesting. Uh, I find in this work that the more we understand beavers, the more successful we'll be managing them. Makes sense, right? And and so I'm going to go through some of the behaviors that beavers have and that apply directly to our success or not success when we try managing and manipulating their beaver ponds. And with that, I'll give you information about the four most common types of water control devices we use. And when you're done, hopefully you'll have a good understanding, not just of what they cost and how they're maintained and the success rates, but why we use what we use in different locations. And that's one thing I find really fun about this work, is that no two beaver situations are the same. And so it does take, some thought and sometimes a little creativity to come up with the right solutions. And we'll finish with just our overall approach to how we deal with any beaver issue. So understanding beaver behavior. We all know they build dams, but why do they do that? Well, they have a variety of reasons. They've evolved when they were predators, mountain saber-toothed tigers, wolves, you name it. So they want to have a watery environment for their own protection. But that pond that they create, or ponds, also gives them access to food, the vegetarians. So they'll chew down trees, as you know, and the wetlands they create help to create food for them, water lilies, cattails, that sort of thing. So that's another reason they build these dams. And then finally, like here in Massachusetts, in northern climates where ponds freeze over, beavers don't hibernate, so they have to store food, and they want and need a certain water depth in order so that when the ponds freeze, they can swim under the ice, grab food that they've stored, and survive the winter. So we have to think about all those reasons when we're working with beavers, because if we do something that is contrary to any one of those basic needs of beavers, they're going to do all they can do to make what we did fail. So the best solutions obviously are going to be one that work for the beavers and that work for us. So when beavers build dams, typically the largest dam will be where they're living, where their lodge is. And so that is the pond that they're going to be most tuned into the water level changes. So we have to think about that if we're going in and manipulating water levels, because if it's the pond where they're living, usually more than a foot of change, they're going to really react to and try to undo. So so that's something to be aware of. And then beavers rarely build just one dam. They'll often be smaller dams upstream or usually downstream. And those dams aren't necessarily, they're not as worried about the water depth there, but they want to have some water so that they can swim and access new food, and travel up and downstream in the safety of the water. Again, getting back to when there were predators, I mean, there still are mountain lions and sometimes coyotes. Um, so they want to be, safe as best they can. Now, when they do dam, what is it that happens in the beaver brain that helps them to build these dams? Well, because they have this desire to have the pond for their own protection and food, then they if they'll build dams in spots that will give them the biggest pond for the least amount of work. They're pretty smart that way. So that that tends to be areas where there are natural constrictions in the streams, or more commonly, where man has created constrictions in streams, such as road culverts. And we'll talk about that more later. But if they feel water flowing, if they hear the water flowing, that draws their attention, because they've also evolved to detect leaks in their own beaver dams. So if they feel or hear water escaping from their dam, they know to go and plug that up. And they'll do the same thing with any man-made devices. If they notice water escaping and they don't want it to, they want to get the water up higher, say, they will do what they need to do to plug that leak. They, because they typically start building their dams with laying down sticks, branches, and then mud and rocks, they have a hard time building a new dam if the water is 2 feet deep or more. It's just hard to get the sticks planted. So they'll typically look for a shallow area to be able to start their dams. And we can use that to our advantage where there, for example, in irrigation ditches, we'll talk about more later, but if it can tolerate 2 feet or more water, you can protect a long stretch of a waterway from new dams if you can tolerate some depth of 2 feet or more in it. And so, so these are some of the things when we are called to a site that we're going to look at and try to think about, how to best approach this problem. I mentioned earlier, in winter climates, like here in Massachusetts, last 2, 3 winters we haven't, but it wasn't unusual that in recent years we could get 12, 18 inches of ice in the middle of the winter. And because beavers don't hibernate, they store food at the bottom of their pond. So in this area, if we lower the water level, say to less than 3 feet near their lodge, they're going to react to that because they know that they need that 3 feet or more of water to be able to have enough depth. So when the ice forms, they can swim under the ice and bite off the sticks in the ice and bring them back into the lodge and have food for the winter. So if we're going to recommend putting in, say, a pond leveler pipe that we'll talk about shortly, that is something that we assess. Are we going to have leave enough water depth for the beavers in order to survive the winter? And so um, we all know beavers create valuable wetlands, but we're talking here today because unfortunately their uses of the land sometimes conflict with ours, and that can be anything: agricultural, residential, transportation, you name it. And when those beaver problems occur, I'm happy to report that most times we can find a solution that balances human needs and the beaver needs. Traditionally, there's different approaches, and you could, if you're getting flooded from a beaver dam, you can tear down the dam, notch it, and lower the water level. or if a road culvert's blocked, you can open it up. And those are good and necessary sometimes to quickly resolve some flooding. The issue, though, is there are only short-term solutions if the beavers are still there, because usually that same night, the beavers will come out and start repairing what we took out. So useful, but not for very long usually. So a traditional way of resolving beaver problems in a longer term solution is trapping. And depending on where you are, that may mean uh, lethal trapping is the only option, like here in Massachusetts, or in areas where there are less beavers and there's appropriate regulations, relocating beavers. That's, so that's a legal option wherever you are, one of those, but it's really only a moderate term solution. If there's a robust beaver population like in this area, we see new beavers in a trapped area usually after a year or two. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So it doesn't usually last too long because the habitat's still there. New beavers are going to find it. So what we're going to spend most of the time on now is talking about long-term solutions with these water control devices to give you a better idea of what's possible. These devices, for a lot of reasons, are the go-to when we have a conflict with beavers. And whether it's saving money long-term or the beneficial environmental effects, is just a lot of reasons why this would be our first option. So there are different types, but there are four main categories of flow devices that I want to review with you here today. First one is the pond leveler pipe, but also then we'll go into protecting man-made structures with culvert fences, fence and pipe systems, and decoy dams. So the pond leveler pipe. This is a great device when you have the ability to have 3 feet of water or more somewhere in the pond. What it does is it creates a permanent leak through the beaver dam that the beavers aren't able to plug. And the way it does that is we use this plastic pipe like they use for road culverts, corrugated pipe, and put a cage of fencing on it, on the intake end. And that's usually a cylinder 5 to 6 or even 7 feet in diameter. And its purpose is not only just to keep the beavers away from the pipe, but to keep them far enough away so that when they swim by on the outside of that fencing, they can't feel or hear any of the water going into the pipe. And if they don't feel or hear the water going into the pipe, they don't realize that there's a pipe in there that's draining water out of the pond. So they'll leave that end alone and they'll focus their attention on the end where they can hear water coming out the back end of the pipe. So we'll protect that with fencing or sticks so they can't get at that. And then the pipe just lets any water coming into the area goes out through the pipe. The pipe is set in the dam after we dig a trench down to the desired water level and lay the pipe in that and then cover it up. So we'll bring the materials to the site on a truck or a trailer and then build it on site and then float it out on these temporary pontoons so that we bring it out to the deepest spot. The pipe's usually about 40 feet long because we want to get it away from the beaver dam. And then we'll sink it in a deep spot and lay the pipe weighted down with a couple concrete blocks into the trench that we built. And you can see here that water is already spilling out of the pipe because the pond's slightly higher than where we set this. And then we covered the pipe back up with the mud that we removed and maybe puts this fencing on the backside and protect that from the beavers. So then anytime this water level is above the lip of this pipe, which is the highest point, it spills out. It doesn't siphon. We don't want it to siphon. We want it to be a gentle flow and just respond to the pond level. Because if there was a drought, we want this pipe to stop flowing, and it will, because if, let me go back, if the water level drops below the if this pond drops down here, the water level in the pipe is equal to that too. And until it fills back up the pond and then it spills out again. So here's an example of this pipe where we had an access road with 3 feet of water on it, and from this beaver dam over here that's hard to see. So we notched the dam, brought the water level down, so it'd be off the road, ran the pipe through it, covered it up, and this flooded access road got drained off. And we just replaced it this year after it'd been in there for 10 years. So, because the fencing corrodes eventually. So that worked well. But keep in mind, this part of managing beavers is always trying to anticipate what they'll do next. And so, and here's a perfect example, because we drew down the water level here. So the beavers wanted to block the water going through this culvert here under the road. So we had to end up protecting that with a fence too. And we'll talk about that later. Pond, depending on where you are, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, and you're fortunate enough to still have salmon, there are concerns by some people about whether fish can get through these devices. They can, as long as they're adapted. And here's a link, or if you search YouTube for Snohomish pond level, you can get an idea of modifications that can be made to these pipes, so even the large coho salmon can get through them. All right, culvert fences. Fortunately, when it comes to road culverts, near almost everyone can be protected. And I would say in my business Beaver Solutions, we probably 60% of what we do is protecting road culverts. It's just, they're just that attractive for beavers to want to dam, because to them, the culvert pipe looks like a hole in a dam. The road bed looks like a dam. So a little bit of work, that whole road bed turns into a dam. So they're really attracted to do that. So if we have a road culvert or any drainage structure where we want to keep the water at the original level, it's an area where we just can't tolerate beavers damming and having high water, and we want to just stop any damming of that structure, a keystone culvert fence is a good option. And there are basically 3 ways that this design works to really discourage beavers. The first is that the obvious, instead of a narrow culvert of 2, 4 feet or whatever it is, the fence is typically 30 to 40 feet long. So it's a lot more work if the beavers want to dam around an entire fence rather than just plugging up the culvert. So they'll pick a different spot. They'll go up, build a dam, usually upstream, occasionally go downstream to build a dam. But that's, again, part of the assessment is what will they do next, and will that cause a problem? But nothing causes a problem faster than a block culvert, because the water has nowhere to go, versus a freestanding dam. It grows much slower. So it's always a good idea to protect road culverts if beavers are in the area. So the long perimeter discourages them. Secondly, if they do start damming, like you can see some mud here in the picture, the beavers will be discouraged because the fence is forcing them away from the culvert, what they want to block. And the third reason these work is that if they are determined, they start damming, the further out they go, the wider the opening that the water is coming into from the backside, the upstream side. And so the wider the fence gets, the less water flow is going through the sides. And so that stimulus of moving water decreases the more they dam. And if the fence length on the side is 12 feet or more, that's usually plenty of length where the beavers will give up and they won't dam around the whole thing. If the fence is made too small, and this is where some people run into trouble doing it themselves, they if they get to the corner, like you say, it only went out 6 or 8 feet, and they did dam out to that corner, then they'll go all the way around. And once they learn to do that, they will continue to do that. So as far as maintenance, these fences need to be kept clean of floated debris, because if leaves and sticks build up on them and create the beginnings of a natural dam, the beavers will then realize that they can dam on it. So we like to look at these fences seasonally and just get in there, us or the landowner, and just lift off any sticks and leaves that are stuck on the fence. And usually, it takes 10-15 minutes. And that's usually all that's necessary to keep it working well. Um, the Whenever possible, we want to put in wildlife passages, because we want to minimize the risk of any roadkill and allow animals, including beavers, to go under the road through the culvert. And so with beavers, fortunately, most won't leave the water with damming materials and go up on an embankment and then down into the culvert. They'll do it all the time without damming materials, but carrying it in their mouth, I don't know, must be difficult or something, or cumbersome. So most don't. Some don't get the memo though. And so once in a while, maybe 1 out of 5 times, we'll have open a culvert, put a fence on it, and the beavers will use a wildlife passage for getting into the culvert and damming it. So then we'll have to temporarily block it and try to break that behavior. So, but most of the time, these are used by all kinds of animals, and it works pretty well. There's other ways to create some passage in addition to the side passage that I just showed you. We can put a one-way door that any animal that does, like we usually put a fence on the backside, but if something slips through and gets inside here, then there's a way it pushes it and can just push and go out. If we have more than one culvert, so long as we have a fence on at least one of the culverts, then the beavers aren't going to do much damming in the other culverts, because damming there isn't raising the water level. They'll start damming and have a little bit of a dam, but they'll stop because the water's going through the other side and not coming up because of any damming. All right, moving along, fence and pipe systems. So this is actually our this is probably most common way that we protect road culverts. And the reason we'll choose this is wherever there's the ability to have some ponding near the road, a minimum of 3 feet, like we're talking about with the pond leveler, this is a good option, because we can then use a pond leveler pipe, run it through a small fence, and then set the pipe at the level that we can tolerate the ponding. That way, the beavers can create a smaller pond, but they are limited in how high they can raise it. And so this involves knowing, how high the roadbed is. Are there any butters around the perimeter that would be affected by ponding? And when that's not a problem, this is a good option. So here's an example where the pond leveler intake pipe starts out here, pipe runs under the water and discharges inside. You can see how there's damming on the fence. So we stop the pipe short of the culvert so that the culvert's 100% open, so that if we have spring runoff or a big storm, that water can go up and over this little bit of damming and through an unblocked culvert so that the road doesn't get flooded. Um, Sometimes we need more than one pipe. Basically for these pipes to work, they have to be able to take any water that's coming into that area and get it out. So in this case, we needed two 15-inch pipes. We use any 8-inch up to 15-inch pipes typically. You get a wildlife passage here. And so the beavers were able, these are set up a bit, so they were able to create a small pond. And surprisingly, even with all the noise of that water cascading out and their access to it, knock on wood, they haven't, I mean, that device first went in over 15 years ago. Um, Fencing's been replaced, but they've never dammed in the culvert, but not all beavers are the same. Some are much more hell bent on figuring out how to get the water up, and some are like, yeah, okay. But so here's an, but I just wanted to show you how you might need more than one pipe depending on the watershed that you're trying to manage. And then lastly, decoy dams. I love these because they're the easiest, cheapest, and minimize any man-made materials that have to be used. And what the idea behind these are is we already talked about how beavers love plugging culverts because it's not much work and the whole roadbed becomes a dam. Well, in this case, what we're doing is we're moving that damming spot about 10 feet upstream of the culvert and encouraging the beavers to dam there instead of inside the pipe. And if given something to build against, particularly if when you put it in, it starts holding back even just an inch or two of water, the beavers will be attracted to that and want to dam on that. And then they'll leave the culvert alone because they're happy they've gotten their pond. So an example there is, here's a highway department culvert that about 8 feet in diameter, and you can see the staining. The beavers had it plugged for a long time. Once the highway department got it open, we knew the beavers weren't going to tolerate dropping the water 6 feet. So we put this fence out there and even added some of the damming materials on it to get them started. And sure enough, within 2 weeks, the beavers had completely rebuilt on top of on that dam. And here's a good example where the road was nice and high. We didn't have to worry about flooding of that, and there were no butters that were a problem. So now all we have is basically a nice natural looking beaver dam. There's no issues for wildlife passage because it's a natural condition. There's no fencing in the way. So any animals that would normally travel up and downstream of a beaver dam can do that. And there's no maintenance because there's nothing man-made. That'll stay there as long as the beavers are there. It'll erode somewhat after they're gone, but very very low tech, very easy for anyone to really to do, because basically just leaving it to the beavers and letting them dam where we would prefer them to dam outside of the pipe. And yeah, they can make these massive wetlands. This is a 12-foot wide culvert they had been damming. Once they built this, they just left the culvert alone and would swim through it, but not dam in it anymore. So when we are called to look at a spot, we have to determine, what's the issue or issues, and at what water level do people need it to be at, and then how does that affect what the beavers are going to want. And even though here in Massachusetts we're the third or fourth most densely populated state in the country, in my experience, 75% of the time we can do something that creates that balance where the beavers can stay, but we protect the infrastructure that we need to protect. And So that, that's encouraging. Situations where these devices really have limited or no use are situations where there's very high flows. Anything that's called a river, we typically aren't going to try to deal with because either it's going to blow out or or it's just too much water to move through pipes, or fences is just going to clog up too easily. And then, unfortunately, before there were wetland protection laws, a lot of development was made in floodplains, and sometimes there's just no room for beavers to have any ponding without flooding someone's septic system or basement or road or whatnot. And then drainage ditches or canals, man-made narrow waterways are real difficult. Learn that the hard way, where put a pipe in a beaver dam and then the beavers just build a new dam right behind it. And then extend the pipe and they build another one, and you just keep chasing them. So those are real challenges. I just want to give a nod to our Beaver Core training program, where we're teaching people these and other techniques so they can implement them where they are. And there's lots of information on that on the Beaver Institute website. And a little bit about success rates, especially is related to removing the
Hi,
beavers.
sweetie.
Whoop. Okay, I thought someone asked something. So the blue line is when beavers move back after trapping versus the success of flow devices. And you can see with over time, the flow devices, even 10 plus years out, you don't see really a drop off. But with trapping, beavers move back, new beavers will move in because the habitat's there. Every beavers, once they sexually mature at age 2, they'll move out of their parents' pond. And so those beavers are looking for a spot that doesn't have other beavers, since beavers are territorial. And so they usually will find the area where beavers have been trapped. Did a study in the town of Billerica, which was 55 different sites, most of them with flow devices, a dozen of them with that were trapping sites where flow devices weren't feasible, and we're able to directly compare, the success. And it showed, you know, I knew this anyways, but it was nice to quantify it, that the sites that we have to trap are a lot more work and more expense. So the taxpayers save money at every site where we can use these devices versus when we have to remove the beavers. Just to give you an idea what things cost here in Massachusetts, I'm sure it varies depending on where you are, but just some round number estimates. And with the maintenance, I don't think I mentioned, with the pond leveler pipe alone, the only maintenance that's really needed for that is we like to check them in the spring, because we want to make sure there wasn't any ice damage, and just make sure that on a rare occasion a pipe might float up or the beavers might chew on the pipe, and just make sure that the outlet end of the pipe is still at the right level and it's flowing well. The fence and pipe devices we like to check twice a year, spring and fall. And usually, again, the pond leveler part of it doesn't need much work, but often sticks get pushed through the fence, and we want to keep that open inside so the culvert's completely available and open. The fences I mentioned, seasonally, we like to keep those clean. The decoy dams usually don't need much of anything, but we will monitor the culvert and just make sure beavers aren't starting to dam inside the culvert. Pretty rare once they've established the decoy dam. And these are so successful that we guarantee them, if we're maintaining them for fairly low cost per year, we'll fix anything that needs fixing. So yeah, I mean, the flow devices, for all these reasons, are preferable to trapping. and it really is the go-to. So I want to just walk you through and end with how we, the hierarchy of how we look at things. Um, if we're called to a problem, the first thing is, do we really need to intervene here? For example, often, well, fairly often, we'll get a call where hiking trails are being flooded. And so generally the best thing to do is, if it's possible, is just reroute the trail to higher ground, and then you don't have to do anything. No cost other than the time it takes to reroute the trail. Sometimes it's a matter of just people being fearful and afraid that, oh, there's a dam there, it's going to keep getting taller and taller. But beaver dams typically don't get, you know, more than 4 feet tall unless the topography allows it to be, kind of wedged in there. And I've seen them 12 feet tall. But education about, what to expect is often a big piece that improves tolerance. Then, if it is really something that has to be managed with the water level, breaching the dam, but as I mentioned, that doesn't usually last that long. So that's a short term but necessary thing to do sometimes. If the if you need to do something more long term, then the next step would be looking at one of these flow devices, because that's going to allow, with minimal time investment every year once it's in, to manage the water level and keep the beavers where they want to be. But if it's a situation where the flow device really isn't feasible, then the beavers unfortunately have to go. Ideally, you're in a place where it's legal to relocate them. So even though there's maybe a 50% mortality rate, that's better than just the only option we have, like here in Massachusetts, because of the density of beavers, is lethal trapping. So that's our option of last resort. It is a necessary one sometimes, unfortunately, but as I said, we want to always keep that as a last resort. So with that, we'll see if there's any questions, comments, or anything that people want to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. At this point, we'll open the floor to questions. You are welcome to raise a hand, put it in the chat, unmute yourself, and I will try and monitor both the chat and the hand raising.
I can watch the chat now too.
Anybody want to open us up?
I'll open up with me, hopefully an easy one, but just, do you have a sense of, within the different categories of mitigation strategies, what the percentage is that you use? And I'm assuming maybe you'll draw from your experience in Massachusetts. Is there a difference if you're talking about projects of coexistence in out west?
Yeah, good question. I would say the percentage, in my experience, the percentage of beaver concerns that end up being resolvable simply with education and tolerance is small, unfortunately. Usually there are real issues. So I would say maybe 5% of the time. The breaching, mostly everyone's does that, but rarely is that enough. So that's maybe 1% of the time that alone will work. And then the flow devices, 3 out of 4 times we'll be able to implement those and have a long-term solution. And then, you know, 25% of the time, the beavers here in Massachusetts end up getting trapped. The As far as elsewhere, it's interesting. There's variables. It's not a simple comparison because there are cultural differences between different regions of the country. So I've seen where there are situations that could be easily managed non-lethally, but people just, I'm not going to do that, and then where you can relocate, particularly out west, that is a good tool to have and a necessary one. Um, Unfortunately, some people have seen that people may rely on that a little too much sometimes and want to relocate beavers, even though a flow device could be used and they could be kept in place. But it's kind of a knee jerk, oh, let's just get rid of them type of thing. It's a step up from killing them, but you know, obviously they don't all survive anyway. So sometimes it's the same thing. Um, so
Well, let me throw in, Mike, the other piece that I liked about your presentation was that you actually broke down the flow devices. So that was really nice for me because I often think of the pond leveler as my flow device go-to. But then when you talked about the beaver, or the dam decoy, or just the fencing of the culvert, I'm curious, like how often are those deployed? Because they're cost effective, less maintenance. Um, and obviously it depends on if it's a culvert problem or, infrastructure
yeah,
problem, but I'm just curious what you're seeing in that regard.
sure. I would say, as far as the breakdown, when we do intervene with a device, I would say the decoy dams are increasing in frequency because we hadn't really used that as a technique until the last 4 or 5 years. And as we've gotten more experience with it, we're finding that there are more situations where we can use that instead of a fence and pipe. And sometimes what we're recommending is we will recommend starting with a decoy dam, and then if the dam gets too high and it does start to affect the butters, then we can always go in with a pond leveler pipe and a fence and make it a fence and pipe device. So that the advantage of that approach is that it's very much less money for the landowner if the decoy dam works from the beginning, because there's less materials, less labor involved. I would say right now, I mean, I could break it down because we keep track every year of every device and what they are. And so if you want detailed information, I can send it to you. But off the top of my head, I would guess that probably, let's see, the fence and pipes are still our most common um, device. I would say those are probably 30 to 30 to 40%, but the pond leveler pipes alone are pretty close because there's a fair number of freestanding dams that cause problems. So while 60% of our devices are put in because of man-made structures, there's 40% that I could tell you that are pond levelers. So maybe overall pond levelers are number one still. Followed closely, I'd guess, by the fence and pipe. And then the keystone fences, we've been trying to minimize their use for two reasons. One is they require a little more maintenance. 3 times a year or so, someone has to be responsible for cleaning them off, and they're also a little more of a maintenance. And what was the other reason? We can't always put in a wildlife passage. So sometimes that can be an issue. So it's much nicer to be able to have the beavers making a dam out in front, whether it's on the fence and pipe or a decoy dam, than trying to keep a fence completely clean and preventing beavers from getting in and plugging it. So yeah, I would say, but we probably still use that 20 to 25% of the time. We're 15 to 20. I don't know if my numbers are adding up, but that, gives you a ballpark anyways.
All right, other questions? I have a couple for Mike, but I'd like to let other people speak first.
I have one more. And
Go
this
ahead.
is
Sure.
I live up in Vermont, so this is kind of getting into the nitty gritty. But when I talk to Fish and Wildlife in Vermont, they often throw Massachusetts under the bus. So because of the trapping laws that, banning trapping, is the Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife tracking how many trapping requests there are? Do you have any sense of how I could get that information?
Yeah. You
And
and
if
I
you want to
maybe
follow
should,
up
maybe
later,
we
we can
should
follow
talk,
up. Yeah, we
we
can
can, yeah,
follow
follow
later.
up, because this could be a long conversation, but in a nutshell, Fish and Wildlife never, back in 96, Massachusetts restricted the types of traps that could be used, and Fish and Wildlife never really embraced that. In fact, they were opposed to it. And at that time, they had been tracking beaver population annually, and they said, nope, voters took it away from us. We're not going to do it anymore. So they haven't been tracking beavers at all for 25 years, as far as like an annual estimate. The that I'm aware of, that if they have, it's news to me. So that's one issue. The other thing is that, yeah, I've heard that also from Connecticut trappers, saying, oh, and it was published in the national, in their national organization newsletter, that Massachusetts is a disaster. and it's anything but. It's actually, you know I'm really thrilled with how, when I started doing this, when we were building these when I was building these devices, people would see them and everyone assumed it was a trap. Now it's rare that anyone doesn't know what it is, and they know that it's a device to coexist with the beavers. And that's been a huge shift in public awareness, and it's something that's pretty cool. And because of that, one a bit of research that I've been dying to have done, and I was really hopeful that the Google program with Eager, I've been talking with them about this, is I would love to see how much wetland acreage there was prior to the change in the law and compare it to how much wetland acreage there is now. And I guarantee you it's going to be dramatically different. And it's just because, and, but we don't have that data yet to refute these, claims that are pulled out of, their butts. So, anyways, I think I went off on a tangent. Sorry. What was what was the question?
Oh, that was good. Thank you.
All right.
I should chime in here.
All right, Mike, there's a question in the chat from Becky Edmonston. Who typically pays for these devices? Landowners, municipalities, land managers, grants, others?
Good. Yeah, good question. It might vary depending on where you are, but here in Massachusetts, there were a couple court cases, and it was determined that in our court system that the person having the problem was the one who would be responsible for paying. So even if the dam was located on someone else's property, that because beavers are wild animals and they're not under the control of the landowner, that the landowner wasn't responsible. But the landowner had to allow someone who was being negatively affected to come onto their property and be able to resolve their problem in whatever legal way they chose. So the costs went to the person being affected. The landowner wasn't responsible, but had to cooperate. As far as, we've been fortunate that we've gotten some funding, both, thank you, Betsy, AWI and some others for doing a cost share. So we offer a cost share program, where people can get assistance for installing devices. It's not a unlimited pot, but it can help. And there are some other grant opportunities depending on where you are. So that's now the only one thing I'll add to this is that if the beaver damming is on, usually if it's happening on town land, most municipalities in Massachusetts will end up paying for, if it's on conservation land, the town will pay to resolve it, even though it's affecting, abutters. So there are situations where municipalities will pay, even though, say, the local conservation commission has no problems or worries about it, because it is affecting others.
We have time for maybe one or two other questions. I'll sneak mine in while people are gathering their thoughts. Mike, do you know if there's been any movement in culvert design? So is there a world where in either new land development or during culvert replacement, there are culverts that could be placed in streams where we know we have a lot of beaver activity? So we can just let everything be?
Yeah, cool. Yes. When I first started, 20 years ago, there was a study in New York, and it looked at what were the variables that contributed to beavers damming culverts. And it clearly showed, and it's logical, that the more a culvert constricted the stream, the more likely it was the beavers would dam it. And so that those culverts or spans, bridges that did not constrict the channel, that were no more likely really to be dammed than anywhere else on the stream. So there, I, I can't speak for other, states or provinces, but certainly here in Massachusetts, there was a stream crossing new regulations that went into effect, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, that not just because of that, but they say if you're replacing a culvert, you need to do it in a way that minimizes that constriction. And so what's nice is that inadvertently that helps to decrease beaver issues, even though I think it was passed for other reasons. But yeah, so that's and then the material of the culvert makes a difference too. The older fashioned corrugated steel pipes with the riffles in it, that makes a little noise and that draws the beaver's attention. Or if it's installed on a significant incline and you get that riffling, again, that draws the beaver's attention. So smooth bore pipes or box culverts that minimize that noise and turbulence will also not only maybe be dammed less, but they're easy to clean out if they do get dammed too.
All right, any final question for Mike?
Well, I appreciate everyone attending, and I hope it was helpful. And so thank you.
All right, and just some final, well, let's thank Mike for